Hello and welcome to episode 393 of the Stacey West podcast, and it is a notable one this evening because it is the first Sunday evening podcast of the new season. That's right, we're going back to twice a week, which is roughly the amount of times that I do the washing up. Joining me this evening, as ever, is Mr. Lamming. How are you, my friend?
I'm tired, Gary. I had a late night last night. I had a night out, didn't I? And I'm very tired. So I've done no washing up or any other jobs today. I've spent the majority of the day just remaining horizontal. It's been great. Just had a lovely time watching the Women's Euros final. That was great. Has a nice little shot in the arm. Nice to celebrate that. And here we are. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. So how are we doing in the women's thing? No, I'm joking, of course. I have also watched it. I don't want Emily to listen to that. She'll be leaving the podcast if I say that. No, I've got quite into it, and I am an international football hypocrite. Whenever a major tournament comes around, be it the men or the women, the group stages come around, and I get angry. I don't like. I've said this before. I don't like faux patriotism. Like, I've seen all these videos coming from the Ivy Club in Rugby, which we no longer drink in for various reasons, and it's all these people around in their England shirts going, "Go on England," and they don't care about anything until it comes to these major tournaments. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a grouch. But I watched us dismantle the Netherlands, I think, didn't we, in the group stages? And it's Emily's fault.
6-1, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, we beat the Netherlands, didn't we? We lost to France and beat the Netherlands. Yeah. And I was doing the podcast, I think, with Emily that night, so I had to watch it to know when I was going to record. And it got me a little bit. And then while I was away last week in the Peak District, and I watched some of the semi-final, and so I've watched the whole game this evening, bar probably the first 10-15 minutes. So
that's cool. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm with you with international football. I like the idea of it generally, but then the reality of it is I never normally like it as much. Like when a World Cup comes on, I prefer watching every other game, like the minnows that you never get to watch. They're the sort of things I like to see. And with the Women's Euros, Steph, my partner, she's been well into it, like properly into it. And I hadn't been that interested at the start. I kind of didn't even realize it was on. And then it's grabbed me, and I've been along for the ride for the last week or so. It's been great, and was very invested this evening. It's nice to have something to be proud of in this country for the first time for a little while.
There's something I like about the women's game, and maybe it's just international football that I've only really found out the last few games. Is there's just this there's this kind of honesty to it, this kind of just raw. There doesn't appear to be the bullshit, and I'm not talking about just the way the game's played, but like the interviews at the end of the game. Both of the two that I saw, Hannah Hampton and Chloe Kelly, were both talking about being English, and like Chloe Kelly was fighting back tears, and there's all these different stories, and it just all feels quite real. And when I say relatable, that's ridiculous, because I'm a 46-year-old man who, how can I relate to women's football? But I relate to it in that it kind of takes me to what I feel football is about. And I've watched the girls, they get the trophy, and they've all got their arms, like Spanish and English, around their arms around each other. And I don't know, there's just something about it that tonight particularly has kind of made me go, it's not about being English for me. It was just about this, I don't know, this rawness, which I really identified with.
Yeah, I can only echo that. So that was congratulations to them. That's really good. But of course, we're a Lincoln City podcast, Gary, aren't we? So we've got some things to talk about today, haven't we? Three news items. I think Stu always likes us to do this at the start of the podcast, doesn't he, when he does our clips? We've got 3 news items today. We're going to be talking about Ethan Erhahon's departure and maybe the subsequent negativity in the fan base off the back of that, followed by a fantastic preseason victory against West Brom yesterday, which very much did the opposite within the fan base. And we are going to do a wider discussion around League One in terms of where do we think Lincoln are going to finish and why, but also have a little bit of a discussion around some of the other clubs as well.
You happy now? Have you satisfied our sponsor? Well, it felt like you were satisfying the sponsor there. Stu likes us to do this. The Stacey West podcast.
Oh,
Sponsored by Stu Wells. So there we go. So that's what we're going to talk about. So first of all, talk about Ethan Erhahon. So as we know, Ethan has now departed the football club for an undisclosed fee, which is rumoured to be around £750,000. You would imagine with some sort of sell-on. That is significantly less than the number that was widely expected, which was a low seven-figure number. Ethan not really played a huge part in pre-season. I think I saw somewhere he's only had about 135 minutes. He's gone to Bolton Wanderers. We haven't brought in a replacement as yet. And generally, what was that Friday, wasn't it? Generally, it made for a pretty miserable Friday. And that is utterly crazy because it's nothing that we didn't expect. And you put the Grimsby defeat, the Grimsby friendly, and then you go, well, we also lost to Bromley. They don't matter. Friendlies don't matter. We're going to talk about a friendly in a minute. I've said off air, I don't really want to talk about it that much because they don't matter. And there's no point talking about wins when you've lost and all that. But then you've also lost Sean Rowan, but that was ages ago we knew it was happening. We've lost Pawdy. That was ages ago we knew it was happening. We've now lost Ethan, which we expected. And yet somehow it felt pretty crap on Friday, didn't it, after the news broke?
Yeah, it did. It's strange because three things that we expected to happen have now happened in terms of the outgoing players. So there is no surprise in that we're going to kick off the season without Pawdy O'Connor, Sean Rowan, and Ethan Erhahon. But when he left, it did kind of feel, bloody hell. Like there was, I think the difference is last season when we sold players, we almost had replacements in the door already, or like they were announced on the same day or the next day. I remember when Lass signed for Huddersfield, I think it might have even been the same day. I might be getting this slightly wrong, but it was very close in terms of timings to when we announced Tendai. And we had lots of other players coming in the building last summer as well that kind of spread that attention a little bit. There's lots of new exciting toys kind of coming into the playroom. And this time around, we've signed two players so far who both seem like good signings on paper, but they're both centre-backs. It's difficult to get excited about centre-backs, isn't it? Yeah, I just felt that there was a little bit of despondency. And also, and you put this brilliantly in your article, is all of us expected at least one of the three players that have left the club to be playing Championship football this season. And all three of them have gone to teams in League One. You know, if that's who is spending the money, if that's who is attracting the players, and there aren't Championship offers on the table, then you have to take it. You put it brilliantly in your article. It was a bit of a stark reminder of our place in the food chain. You know, we're probably a little bit lower down than as fans we maybe feel like we are. And it was just a bit of a reality hit, I think, when all three of them are going to be in the same division, albeit a bigger, more ambitious clubs. But yeah, it was a little bit depressing on Friday afternoon, I must admit.
Now, there has been quite a lot of rumour, and I think some of that we need to address as well. I think one of the first rumours is that Ethan kind of pressed for a move and pushed for a move. My understanding is that it wasn't particularly a player-led move. When JJ McKinnon went, I think we were pretty sure that was player-led. He wanted to go, he wanted to play regular football, so off he goes to Burton on loan. I think there was just a point here where we've gone to the market. We've needed, as a club, we've made the executive decision to move him on, and there are suitors. I have a feeling that there may be a little more to it that we will never find out as supporters, and I don't think that that's in terms of him being a particularly bad egg. The stories that I've heard from around the ground is that he was great, bubbly person. I'd seen him at training, the open training day. Did you come with me to the open training day last year? And he was arm around MJ Kamara, and he seemed, I didn't think there's rumours of him being a bad egg, but I didn't think there was. But I do think that the full story of the transfer is probably something that we won't find out. The fact is, we have still made a significant profit on the player. And I think Tom Williams has said a little bit further up here, does 500,000 difference year to year on EE matter to a business that loses 3 million a year? And do you know what? It's a good point, because there was rumours earlier in the year that, the investors may have wanted to put a little bit of money in, but there's no point if we're losing 3 million. There's no point in losing 3.5 million, because that won't make a significant difference. It's got to be 6, 7, or 8 million more for it to make a significant difference. So it's a fair point. He has moved on. He hasn't moved upwards. I think, if anything, the only damage is in terms of link and developing players. As you've said, all three have now moved to clubs in our division. bigger clubs. Let's not make any bones about it. As you said, Reading, bigger club, Huddersfield, bigger club, Bolton, bigger club. Had he gone to Wigan, don't care about their FA Cup win in 2010 or whatever it was. As I said online, Ethan won't get a medal for that, so that doesn't matter. You put us and Wigan side by side in League One, we'll get better attendances. I ought to have checked that before I said it.
I mean, they're quite similar. They're quite similar.
Yeah, we're a similar size
bigger,
club.
but it's similar. Yeah, they've got a massive stadium, but the stadium size is the only difference, I'd say, in terms of the club size. The actual fan base is similar, I'd say.
Definitely. So I think that's the situation. I think we've taken what we can right now. We could probably have got more last year. He hasn't had the best of seasons. He hasn't had the worst of seasons. I don't think his fee was affected by Jimmy Walker. I just think it's something that we have to hold our hands up and go, right, we've made a profit, not as much as we wanted, but as Tom says, what difference would that extra 500,000 have made? We would like to have had it. We could have spent it on a player, but we've still made a profit.
Yeah, we have. And I think what's disappointing is the fact that on the pitch, he was our best footballer. He was our best player, and we can't deny that. And it's always disappointing losing your best player. And he was probably the only player in the whole squad, probably him and James Collins, in fairness now, who I felt were completely irreplaceable with a like for like. Like if James Collins got injured, we've got Fred, brilliant. We've got Rob Street, brilliant. But they're different players. They're not quite got that experience. Erhahon, as much as we've got Hamilton, we've got Bayliss, we've got McGrandles, who was excellent yesterday, by the way. McGrandles in the holding role. There is a missing piece, the jigsaw there with Ethan. And I think he's the only player that I feel, without paying a fee that we're just not going to, it's going to be difficult to get a like-for-like replacement of someone who has the same current ability that Ethan has. We're going to have to sign someone with potential again that we hope can grow with us. But can we sign someone realistically that's as good as Ethan Erhahon is now? No, we can't do that at Lincoln City. And that's probably the disappointing thing. It felt to me that in League One, this is a bit later as well, but in League One this season, I feel there's no cannon fodder. Like we all predicted Shrewsbury to be crap this time last season. We all predicted Cambridge to struggle. We all predicted Crawley to struggle. It was almost easy to see who was going to be down there. I don't think there's any cannon fodder that gives you a guaranteed 6 points. I know we were crap against those teams, but theoretically, a guaranteed 6 points. And I kind of felt, well, I don't feel we're much worse off than we were last year, but we're definitely not stronger yet on paper. We're not stronger than we were last year. And a lot of other teams are. And that was kind of how I felt on Friday afternoon. But things, of course, can change quite quickly, can't they, in 24 hours or so?
So Wigan's average attendance was actually more than ours. They were 9,946 and we were just over 9,000. Wycombe, bizarrely, 21st average attendance on 5,413. Mm-hmm. That's poor. But anyway, so he's gone. I'm wondering, we're talking about a like-for-like replacement, and most of Ethan's career has been playing at Lincoln City in a 3-5-2, and that tends to be one holding midfielder and then two a little further on. So the holding midfield was absolutely vital. We're going into this season in a 4-2-3-1. So in actual fact, it's almost as if a like-for-like replacement, yes, would be brilliant, but it's not exactly as imperative as, for instance, getting a like-for-like replacement for a centre-back or a left-back, because it's two playing there. Now, I think Conor McGrandles as a lone 6 probably doesn't quite cut it at League One level. I think Conor McGrandles playing as part of a 2 in that kind of role, be it Tom Bayliss, be it Ethan Hamilton, be it when he comes back, by the way, and this hasn't been mentioned much, Dom Jeffries, who was playing that role, I think, for Gillingham a season or so ago. Any of those players in a 2, I think, can perform the job that we need them to do. I do expect us to sign a holding midfielder, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that it's imperative before we play Reading. I think we can take our time, see what's out there, and even if it goes to the last week of the transfer window, I don't think it's a major issue.
Agreed. Yeah, I think in terms of timings, as long as we've got one in before the end of the window, I'd be happy. With left back, I think that's a little bit more pressing. Riley Towler was fine there yesterday, solid, but it'd be nice to have an actual dedicated left back in the building as soon as possible. But just on Erhahon, it's similar to wingers, I think, in that we mentioned, I think Ben and I last week when we were discussing this, the left wing role, for example, you play Rico Hackett there, like we did yesterday. He's naturally left-footed, holds the width. You play Eric Ring there, different sort of profile, right-footed, can go either side, probably holds the width but drives inside. Or you might play Jack Moyle on the left wing, and he'll naturally drift inside and collect the ball more centrally. You've got 3 different profiles of players all playing that same role. In this holding role with 2, it's probably the same sort of conversation. You want a profile of player that we don't have yet. And I think the profile of player we don't have yet in that role is someone who is really comfortable receiving the ball deep and being able to play progressive passes forwards. Because Conor McGregor is great at keeping possession, doesn't pass forward very often. Ethan Hamilton's brilliant at winning it back and being an energy in box to box. Tom Bayes is good at driving forward, like carrying it. His passing's okay, but he's not really a distributor. In my opinion, it'd be a ball playing holding midfielder that's happy to collect it deep. And I think you have that collection of 4 players plus Tom Jeffries, who's kind of jack of all trades. I think you've got a nice selection of options there. But that's the one profile that we don't have. And I have to say, as good as Ethan was when he first signed, he was great at winning it back. He was great at interceptions. What he really improved at was his progressive passing. And I think that's something that I would like to see us add to the squad. But you're right. We've got a decent amount of depth there already, which is pleasing.
Do you think selling Ethan Erhahon for less than we had hoped for it signals a lack of ambition, which a lot of people say? Michael Skabala, after yesterday's game, was saying, it's not a shop. You can't just go and buy who you want. And there was quite a bit of criticism on that as well. I mean, we're obviously going to come on and say that's unfair criticism. We're obviously going to come on and kind of defend, not because we just have to defend the club, but because as kind of hopefully level-headed people, we see that it isn't that easy. But when you see a lot of other clubs making a lot of other signings, it does make it a little bit more difficult to digest, I think, when we have only brought in 2, irrespective of the fact that we probably only needed to bring in people to replace those that were going.
Yeah, and I don't want to kind of link too much into yesterday's performance because it was only one game and it was a friendly. Yeah, but what was really pleasing is because what we've been speaking about all pre-season really is who's leaving the football club and who's coming in. As you do most pre-season talk, it's all about transfers really. And what was just really pleasing as a bit of a reminder to us all, particularly to myself, was that we've got some really good footballers already at the club. And yes, sometimes just having something new and shiny is exciting, but you don't need it. Now we know we need to make additions, but yeah, it was quite affirming just to remember that there's a good competent squad of players there already, and we just need to add the finishing touches to it. We didn't expect a particularly busy transfer window this window, but because it hasn't been busy, you then read more into the individual situations rather than when there's 10 transfers coming, you can't give each of them as much detail and thought, I suppose, as if there's 3 or 4 coming here and there. So, yeah, I don't know. I like we said on Friday, probably was a little bit disappointed at the fee or reported fee and the fact he's still in League One. But yeah. With context and hindsight, I think it's easy to be a little bit more balanced on it all.
So I'm making a note for the second part because something has just come up. Just a couple of little points to mention before we move on. Paudie O'Connor, who we obviously lost in the summer, absolutely slated yesterday as Reading went down 4-0 at home to Portsmouth. I saw one post even say that he should be arrested after that performance. Sean Rowan didn't miss a minute of football for us all last season, injured at Huddersfield and unlikely to make the first squad, the first team of the season. I'm not laughing at that. I don't find it amusing for Sean, but it does just go to show, things swings and roundabouts, isn't it? And at the minute, we've got Riley Towler popping up with a goal yesterday. We've got Sonny Bradley popping up with an assist yesterday. So we're going to have to come on to yesterday. Now, I am going to pop a disclaimer at the beginning of this. 2 disclaimers. One, I didn't see the game. People know the reason for that. So I was meant to be at the game. I wasn't there. I don't put a lot of stock in pre-season friendlies. I didn't against Arsenal last year. I don't now. We did still beat a championship team 4-2, and it was their virtually full strength side. But it would be remiss of us to discuss this, saying, didn't we do well against West Brom when in midweek we were pretty poor in the first half against Grimsby? But the games are played with a different intensity, I think. I think our intensity yesterday was probably a little bit more than you would expect from West Brom because we kick off next week. They kick off in 2 weeks. So we were at different points in our pre-season. So there are a lot of reasons to look at yesterday's game with context rather than as a standalone result. I remember us beating Middlesbrough 5-1 in something like 1992 when they were a Premier League side and we were Division 4 and we won 5-1 or whatever. and it was, all sweetness and light. And at the end of the year, sure, Middlesbrough were relegated, but we were nowhere. So that's my caveat. I don't want to be accused of being a hypocrite, because I get accused on all sorts of platforms for all sorts of things. Some of it accurate, to be fair, but hypocrite I do not want to be called. So that's what I'm going to say before I go over to you to wax lyrical about us beating West Brom.
Well, everything you said is true. The biggest positive for me yesterday, though, was it really lifted the mood. It really lifted the mood. A brilliant start to the game. It was 2-0 up after 3 minutes. Jovan Makama looked unplayable. Like he was, I know he scored his 2 goals, but he was brilliant for the 70-odd minutes he was on the pitch. It's really, really good. Callum Stiles playing left back for West Brom could not deal with him at all. Callum Stiles, who has been a championship fixture and had a few multi-million pound, or at least one multi-million pound move in his career. So, it's just really pleasing to see the players that are already here play really well. Not going to do a massive over analysis of the game, but I suppose it's worth just a couple of things that I noticed that I thought were quite interesting. First and foremost, Riley Towler played left back in a back 4. I thought there might be not particularly seeing the lineup, thinking, we're going to be a back 3 here with Rico kind of playing as a left wing back, or we're going to be in that kind of hybrid sort of in and out of possession, different shapes. But no, we were just 4-2-3-1 for the whole game. Rico was receiving the ball really high, really wide. It was good. Conor McGrandles was quietly superb yesterday, breaking up play, hard to get the ball away. It was really, really good. I kind of thought, Ethan, who? When we've got Conor in there. Again, like you said, as a 2, as a holding 2, it just suits him so much more. Obviously, Jovan was superb. A couple of things that I noticed tactically, which I thought was quite interesting. Out of possession, we were more of a 4-4-2 when West Brom were in there like deep build-up, and we were setting some quite interesting pressing traps. What I thought was particularly interesting is whoever was playing in the number 10 role, so Ben House in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes of the game before he had to go off with his head injury, and then latterly Jack Moylan, that was the first line of the press. So normally whoever was playing in the 10 role last season and in a lot of 4-2-3-1 shapes, it's that number 10's role to track the holding midfielder of the opposition, so the deepest midfielder of the opposition. What I thought was super interesting is that our number 10 was in the front line pressing, and it was one of the 6s, normally McGrandles, who was stepping up, really aggressively stepping ahead and pressing the DM. So that's just a really front-footed and aggressive mentality, and I just really like to see it, because maybe we did it last year, but I didn't notice it last year. So that was interesting. And something nothing to do with on the pitch directly, the dugouts have swapped. So the dugouts, the home and away, are now switched over. Now, had the fortune, and I didn't catch the chap's name, so I don't know if he's a listener or not, but Ben and I and Rachel were sat one row behind a chap who went to watch the team out in Portugal. And apparently it was mentioned there with some of the club staff, and marginal gains, ultimately. That's where the linesman is. The linesman's always on left backs. So that dugout is where the lino is. So you probably have a little bit more influence over the lino if you're in front of it as the home dugout. You don't want to give that advantage to the away fans, the away team. And it also splits up that kind of corner of the pitch with away fans and away dugout all close together. It just kind of splits it up a little bit. And I thought that's a good idea. Why is it taking us however many years, how many decades it's been that way around to think of that? So yeah, noticed that. Thought that was interesting.
I think we had that dugout once before, but it wasn't as far down the line. I'm pretty sure we have had that dugout before. I can't remember when, and I'm sure I would be corrected. It might have been John Beck era. Although, was it John Beck that moved it almost down into the corner? But also, I think it sprung up from the Joe Gardner sending off, didn't it? Because essentially the away dugout essentially bought that. So I can see it. I understand it. I like that. I like those marginal gains. I like when you pick up on things like that. Or as a club, I suppose it's the same with some of the free kicks that we did last season as well, where you pick up on those sorts of things. So yeah, again, just these are the things that you can talk about comfortably in pre-season friendlies and not sound like a hypocrite.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing, there is now undercover protection from the elements for away disabled fans, which is something that I think there's some bad optics with that from last season with some away fans getting wet. So that looks like the club have done something to solve that problem as well. So fair play, credit where it's due. I don't think they've even mentioned it. I just noticed it yesterday. So
it's actually been it's been a problem since Chesterfield in the 2017-18 season. I think when they put the away supporters next to some bins, they thought so. It's nice to see that being done
on the pitch. One last thing, last thing is just that we were a threat from set pieces for the whole game, and it was great to see that's clearly continued from last season. And I'm pretty sure I spotted Scott Fry still around. So that was a positive in regards to set pieces. So yeah, it was just a really pleasant performance. We were, like you say, a week ahead probably of West Brom in terms of like pre-season prep and fitness and things. But it was a really positive performance against a decent team who's got aspirations of being in the top 6 in the Championship next season. But more than anything, it was just a real confidence booster and a mood elevator, really going into the proper football when it all starts for real on Saturday.
Just to clarify, I think reference Scott Fry. There is another club that want him, and he's working his notice, despite the fact that we brought somebody else in. Now I don't know this for fact, but that would suggest to me, with him working his notice, that the team that are taking him have not agreed a compensation package. Because usually, if a senior member of staff, I don't think that counts for like some of your physios or something like that. But I think that tends to be kind of an unwritten rule. I know in some industries, the place you're going will buy out your notice period. Well, I don't think that's happened. So it feels like Scott will be around until his notice period, which is 6 months, which I think will take him into December. So unless something changes, we may see him around for a while, a little while longer as yet, which I think is quite interesting. All I will say, I wasn't at the game, but at kickoff, I had this awful vision of a good Championship side, because that's what they were last season. Coming here, putting 3 or 4 past us, and us going into the season on the back of 3 defeats, Bromley, Grimsby, and then West Brom, none of which would really particularly mean anything. You could even put Huddersfield in that, behind closed doors. It would have been 4 defeats, conceding goals, best players gone. There was a tweet I keep mentioning, I can't remember who put it, about Lincoln losing control of a narrative over the summer, which kind of grated at me a little bit, because I don't think there is a narrative before the story starts. But that would certainly have been the story of next week, would have been we're out of form because we've lost 4 friendlies, which is, pointless. They are what they are. We've lost our key players, which were always going to go. We haven't brought players in. That is still something that is a concern. We do still need an out-and-out left back. You wanted one in before pre-season training started. I certainly would have liked to have seen one come in before the season proper started. The market as it is. Not the top 20 podcast were quite clear that Lincoln City, that I think they said in their prediction, which we'll touch upon in a bit, that clubs like Lincoln City don't have a right to be 6th. I think they've predicted as 11th because we don't have a 6th place budget. So we've got to be clever with that budget, which is why it takes us longer to buy players than clubs that are willing to pay £8,000-9,000 a week. Blackpool can quite easily go out and get players at this level when they're paying that. Wickham can as well. But with the independent regulator on their way, hopefully things like that will soon change. Right, I think this is a good opportunity for us to go for a break, have a look through some comments, and then if you're listening at home, we will be back in just a moment. I always like to finish on a nice round number, so 2940. Doesn't even make it easier, it's just I'm a little bit OCD. Right, let's have a look.
2840.
Oh, bollocks, I've written down 29. That would have been an issue. Right. So we've got 50 odd people watching at the minute, so thank you, guys. Evening, John. Evening, Neil. Emily is quite happy, naturally so. Evening, Andy, and another Andy. Evening to you as well. Evening to Steve. That is Ben. Up the Lionesses, says Adam Bull. Emily says that the egos aren't the same with the Lionesses, which is fine. Tom Williams did say be interested. Thoughts on why so much attention is paid to transfer fees. One thing that does grate on me a little bit is the undisclosed fee. And I think that whilst at the time of sale, I can kind of understand it. And we'll discuss this off air rather than on air. A little special for people that are watching. The actual theory behind the undisclosed fee, if you think about it, is pony. Because the story is where they are undisclosed fees, so that the clubs don't know what we've got to spend. So like you go to that classic Fernando Torres move into Chelsea, Liverpool, cash laden, overpay for Andy Carroll because Newcastle know how much money they've got to spend.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not in the paper, it doesn't mean nobody's going to know, because there's agents involved in the Torres deal, there's Torres involved in it, there's clubs involved in it. You know, in football, nearly all the other clubs know what the other clubs' budgets are, what wages are. You know, I've had conversations, and the conversation is probably off the record, with people at the football club who will say to me, so such and such has gone here, £8,000 a week. And you think, so keeping an undisclosed transfer fee kind of isn't, I don't know what your thought is, but it's kind of, what's the point?
Yeah, I get the theory. It's just like you say, that the actual reality of it doesn't seem to really add up. It stops, I suppose it stops fans knowing, and therefore maybe stops the rhetoric, and maybe it kind of stops the rumor mill getting going quite so high. Oh, we've got this amount of money, right? So who we're going to buy, and undisclosed just has the likes of you and me talking about and it's undisclosed, rather than right. We know we've got X amount. What we're going to do with it? Maybe there's an element of that, but the people that actually matter in terms of transfers, i.e., the two clubs, the player, the agents, they all know. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of with you in regard to Tom's question. I think it's a good point though. A good question in regard to, does that money actually make a difference? But I just think it does, because budgets are so tight, and every little helps. Like every little helps. So yeah, I think there is, particularly when we are trying to make a profit and we're trying to reinvest and we're trying to gradually move up the food chain. I just think every pound counts, you know. So, and yeah, if we're not a team that is trying to take that approach, then you're probably right. The actual amount doesn't really matter. I imagine Huddersfield fans couldn't give a toss exactly how much each transfer fee is, because all they're focused on is getting promoted. Whereas for us, the transfer fee kind of directly impacts our ability to progress. So that's my opinion anyway.
They won't be if they go bust, will they? Dog bothering wankers. Right. What I would also say on that, by the way, is I think that in your end of year accounts, every football club by law should be required to then break down their transfers. So even if it's not at that time, like at the end of the year, it should be. And that is purely and simply because I love stats. And at the minute, officially, our record transfer fee paid is still actually only 75,000 to Tony Battersby and Dean Walling, I think it was, whereas technically we know it's probably John Akindi. So Benny's watching. He wanted to know who's hosting tonight, not you. Harry Jackson, he's on. He would have hoped that Erhahon had gone to the Championship. Yeah, like I say, the Championship pounds are worth just as much as League One pounds. Walter is interesting that Ethan hasn't said goodbye to the fans. Honestly, I'm actually not sure it is. I don't think you regularly get that when a player leaves. They don't normally say goodbye, do they?
I got the feeling Pordy kind of did in the last game of last season. There's a little element of that,
but he knew he was going.
But exactly, and that's the difference. He knew he was out of contract. He knew he was leaving. We all knew he was likely leaving. I think when there's like an active development and a player that's still under contract, I just don't think you see it as often. Maybe, I don't know.
No. Sue said, I think EE leaving was made feel worse, but negative comments from some of our fans, shocking, really. And respect to Sue, I saw that she was out in Spain as well, watching the Bromley game, so fair play to her. Fair play. John, we've already said hello to John. Sorry if I'm skipping past it. He's David Tuplin. So this one Emily will like. I thought Tyler had a very good game yesterday. I'm assuming that's Riley Towler. Yeah, we all do it.
John just looked really solid.
Yeah. So John Booth said Erhahon was Bolton's 9th signing this window. Huddersfield have spent big again. There's a bonkers divide in spending and budget. Yep. Enjoy your fishing. Says hello. I'm just passing everybody to get to the bottom so that we can get going again. And we will get going on 34. I've got that right this time. 34-30. Hello and welcome to the second half of the Stacey West podcast, episode 393. I'm sure Stu doesn't need this, but just a recap. We've talked about Ethan Erhahon leaving the football club, and we've talked about pointless friendlies looking ahead for the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to be talking about League One. Now, Chris is a little more versed in this than me because he's already done a 1 to 24. I think Dridim on our Patreon wanted to know where our league predictions were as well. The thing is, we're not going to do a 1 to 24. One, because Chris has already done it. Two, because whilst I should have been researching it, I was walking in the Peak District or sitting in A&E. And three, everyone else is doing it. So we don't need to. But what we'll do is what we did last year. We'll pick our 4 teams for relegation. We'll pick a dark horse one way or the other, either somebody that might struggle that would surprise you or somebody that might do well who'll surprise you. We'll pick our top 3 and then we'll go for where Lincoln finish. As a warning to nobody other than the man currently sitting to my right as you look at the screen, we do only have 30 minutes for this. So I'm just being absolutely clear on that. That we can run over by a couple of minutes, but I don't want to still be sat here on Tuesday while you root through a phone book full of research, because I know that's the sort of thing that usually happens. So,
Noted. Yeah, that's fine.
So there we go. So shall we talk about the teams that we think will get relegated? Now, I know that there is some crossover. So I'll go first. And if there's crossover, we can just say, yeah, I agree, or we can follow it up. And my first team to be relegated on almost every single 1 to 24 I've seen, and therefore belying your theory that there are no whipping boys, is Northampton Town. And I think not the top 20, which I'm going to lean on a little bit because I have listened to theirs. They made a great point that Kevin Nolan started well at Orient and then it dropped off, started well at Notts County and then it dropped off, started well at Northampton in that he kept them up. But the comments he made in the press this week about needing to sign defenders, midfielders and forwards, utterly bizarre. You know, their main striker at the minute is Tom Eaves, which would have been brilliant if it was 2017, but it's not. I just think Northampton, they were a below average side last season, and the reason they didn't get in deeper trouble last season was there were some poor teams in the division, almost all of whom beat us at least once. But I just think that Northampton are sadly not going into this season with the right man at the helm. There doesn't seem to be a coherent plan for building, and I can see them dropping out of the division.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not going to spend too long, but just a couple of other extra points is just that on the pitch, in terms of just their squad, there's been quite a bit of churn, but I just don't think they're any stronger than they were last year. And I just think they're probably weaker. Sometimes when you've got a manager that maybe isn't your kind of ace up your sleeve, sometimes a good squad can get you out of that. You know, Wickham probably is a prime example. There's a few question marks about their gaffer, but their squad's brilliant. Yeah, I just think Northampton, just compared to everyone else, are probably a step away. I don't think they're going to be like cut adrift though, like a couple of teams were last year. But I'm with you; they'll probably occupy that bottom 4.
Okay, you next,
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Burton Albion, which I think is a little bit. It's a little bit maybe controversial because they appear to be just masters of the impossible escape every season. For the last 3 or 4 seasons, they've had a horrific start to the season, made a lot of changes in January, got a new manager in, and then just stayed up by the end of in the nick of time. And Gary Bowie did a fantastic job last season of keeping them up, and they were one of the better performing teams in the second half of the season to drag themselves out of it. But I just feel like it's a bit like Sunderland when they were in the Premier League, and you can only circle the plug hole so long before you drop out. And with the uncertainty behind the scenes in terms of misdemeanors previously with last summer's transfer window and ownership not being quite the safe pair of hands that maybe they had previously, there were just a few question marks over here. And again, there's been a little bit of squad churn again. Not entirely sure they're any stronger than they were last year. So yeah, I've got Burton to go down as well.
Yeah, they've lost Sweeney, they've lost Bodvarsson, they've lost Roman Burrell this week for £1 million. They'll be looking to reinvest some of that. But again, I think There were some bad teams in the division last season, and they seem to always be the ones that pull themselves away from it. And again, to coin not the top 20, and I don't want to just rehash all their material, but I think Ali Maxwell talked about gravitational relegation, where if you're there year on year, every year, eventually you get sucked in. And it's true, you only have to look back at the likes of Rochdale, for instance, that have, as you've said, circled the plug hole and then gone down. Wimbledon did it for several seasons. There's only so many times you circle that plug hole before actually your number is up. And I think it's come in for Burton. I know they've got the owners that came in last year, but as you say, there's question marks over their recruitment. I've got question marks over Gary Bowyer personally. I think he found a formula that did relatively well last season, but for me, I don't want to go on. I think that they will be in trouble. The next one that I'm going to pick is a little bit feels a little bit wrong, but it's Wimbledon. Now, I think of the teams coming up, I think at least two could be in trouble. I think Port Vale could struggle as well. But there's been a couple of them improved. Bradford and Doncaster have made signings. Port Vale are going into it pretty much as they finished last season, and Wimbledon are going into it having lost a couple of key players. They've lost both their wing backs, which was a key part to what they do. They are very together. They're a great side against the top half teams last season. They struggled, I think, against poorer teams. But the quality coming up from League Two is not the same as it was in previous seasons. Josh Nerfville is the one that concerns me with them leaving. Attack-wise, they were never particularly a potent attacking side. And I think that the teams coming up, it's almost like a gap between the Championship and the Premier League in that I almost expect all of them to be in or around the bottom half of the table. Certainly, I expect Wimbledon to be. I think they do have a real spirit. They've almost got like a crazy gang spirit of days gone by. But I think it's going to be a difficult step up for them to make.
Agreed. Yeah, great club. I love the fan ownership. I think that's something that all supporters. They're almost like everyone's second club, aren't they? They're an Exeter in terms of that regard. And isn't it upsetting, that to have that model means that it's probably impossible to actually directly compete with not even the likes of like the top 6 teams in this division, but the teams like that are comfortably mid-table budget-wise. It's just impossible with that model to be able to do that. That's really upsetting, but that's also the harsh reality of it. And they lost 2 players. They lost both wing backs. They hardly scored any goals last season. I think they scored 53, possibly 50-something goals last season and got promoted off the back of that. Won every playoff game 1-0. Brilliant story. Did so well, and I imagine they'll go down fighting. I just don't think they've got quite enough in terms of just quality to be consistent enough, picking up enough points to avoid the drop.
Yep. Next for you.
Yeah, I keep changing my mind between these two, so I'll mention the controversial one that I made my mind up about, and I've maybe got a doubt in the back of my mind now off the back of some of their signings, but. And you got a little bit of hate for this online when you predicted this, but it's Mansfield, and they've been quite active in the transfer window, and particularly the loan signing of McDonnell from Nottingham Forest really catches the eye because he was someone who I'll be honest, I was hopeful that we'd try and convince to come to us. I thought he'd be brilliant. I think he really elevates their ability in the middle of the park. But for me, it's as much as one season there's not often a direct correlation from one season to the next. The second half of last season, Mansfield Town were horrific. They won 4 of their last 25 games, including the final 2 games of the season. So if you ignore those final 2 games of the season, they won 2 out of 23 games. That's not the sign of a good football team. And like you say, if the overall quality in League One is even just edging a bit, if the floor is just rising a tad, you're closer to it if you don't improve. And they've got more legs in the team with the signings that they brought in. I just think that form of the second half of last season just shows that there's some serious question marks there. I think they'll score goals. They always do. I just don't think and Nigel Clough's teams never are defensively strong enough to be in a relegation battle. I don't think. I think they can outscore teams when they're on form. They can outscore teams when they're confident. If you go on a bad run again mid-season, I just think how he plays and how they're like tactically are set up, they're always open. And I think that could bite them. I think that's quite a controversial one. You know, they could be quite comfortable come the end of the season, but yeah, that I couldn't get away from that, even if I tried to justify it like against it and say no, they're going to be fine, they're going to be fine, they're going to be fine. But everything kept coming back in my head of but they were horrific for the second half of last season.
Now I'm going to get stick from Mansfield fans now, and I'm sure that Stu will clip this one up because since I said I thought that they were relegation candidates, I think they're going to stay up because since then they've signed Joe Gardner and since then they've signed McDonnell, and I think that they are two signings that will help them stay up. They are loan signings, so it's it's trying to build something on foundations of sand a little bit. It's kind of like where we were with Rodgers and Morgan, only the rest of the team isn't as good as the rest of our team was. But I think they're going to stay up, and I'm going to infuriate another fan base now. And Stu will clip this one up, and I'm going to stand. I didn't realise until I started researching this just in between the Lionesses game and now that I'm going to agree with Gab Sutton on this one. I think Rotherham United might go down. Now, when I say I've got serious concerns for Rotherham, I don't mean it. I don't care one bit about Rotherham, but I think that they are leaning very, very heavily into romance. They're leaning very heavily into Matt Hanshaw, club legend, Richard Wood, club legend, whereas actually they're coming into this season weaker than they finished last season. They've lost the likes of Odofin, they've lost the likes of Clark Harris. Their top players really are probably Joe Powell and Sam Nomby. Yeah, I like those, but if they're your best players when you're in League One and you're weaker than you were last season, I'm not so sure that that's a great basis. They will be relying on some youth to come through. I don't think you can particularly do that. You know, we've relied on youth for a couple of seasons. It takes a while for those younger players to come through. I think that they're trying to find a new identity, a different identity to the one under Steve Evans, which is going to be difficult. I also think they've got a lot of legacy players. They've got an awful lot of players in their squad who are past their best, who are not playing at their peak. It feels like a ticking time bomb to me, and it's all. I'm not going to be smug because I don't like to see clubs being relegated particularly. I'm not smug when a club gets relegated, but this is Steve Evans is doing. We went to Rotherham, you and I, late last season, and it just felt like a club that had the soul ripped out of it. And I wrote as much in my report, and I don't think that a sticking plaster of a couple of club legends and likeable people is enough to keep them up. And I don't think that the goodwill that he built up is something that you can base a progression on. It's enough to kind of help you get a start, but you've got to have something more solid, and I don't think Rotherham have got that.
Very interesting. I certainly had them nowhere near the top part of the table, but I certainly didn't consider them for relegation. But like you say, it could go wrong. There are a lot of question marks over them. The one I maybe wanted to add to the mix was Exeter. It was between Exeter and Mansfield, and I think Exeter's a more sensible prediction than Mansfield. But like I said, just the question marks over Mansfield with last season. But with Exeter, they're undoubtedly going to have a bottom four budget again. They have to overachieve their budget to stay up, and they've done that superbly. Every season they've been in League One, they're an incredibly well-run club. One of the two fan-owned clubs again, but that again, as we mentioned with Wimbledon, has its limitations. Have once again lost some of their better players. A couple of loans have gone back, and on the pitch, I just feel that their squad is a little weaker than it was last year. And they could be down there. I think there's like a mini league down there that's maybe got 6 or 7 clubs that I think are kind of almost definitely going to be down in that bottom 6 or 7. But what order they are, I'm not entirely sure. And there's always 1 or 2 extras, like you mentioned with Rotherham, like the NTT20 predicted with Peterborough, that find themselves in that conversation as well that maybe isn't as expected or predicted. But yeah, I was saying in terms of the ones we've talked about, because you briefly mentioned Port Vale as well. But the ones we've mentioned, I think that's my mini league in the bottom 6 or 7.
I'm not having Exeter for going down because I think Gary Caldwell always manages to find enough to make them hard to beat. They're hard to break down. 2-0 draws are kind of a testament to that. I think he outperformed his budget to league position. I think he was 3rd, wasn't he? I think it was Wellens, Michael Skubala and him, I think he's got enough to do that again. So, Stu, if you are going to clip up that I think Exeter will stay up, because everyone else has got them in the 1 to 24 at the bottom. Yeah, I don't just want to get shit off of the fans. I'd like to get a little bit of, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I just think Exeter City, whilst they will struggle, I don't think that they'll be near the top 6, but I think they'll be outside the bottom 6. Now, do you have a dark horse either for relegation or promotion?
Not for relegation. I've got a question mark over a team who I think will have expectations of finishing much higher than I've predicted them. Do I think that they're going to end up in the relegation battle? Almost certainly not. But it's Barnsley for me. I just think there's so many question marks over that club at the moment. I know they've got a club legend in the dugout now, but untested as a first-team manager. A few exciting attacking players still at the club, but just a squad that's a bit patched together and significantly weaker than it was this time last season, in my opinion. And they were underperforming last season. So I just think, that could go well. They could be fine, but that could unravel a little bit. I don't think they were down in the bottom 4, but I predicted Barnsley to be 16th in my table. So I imagine Barnsley fans would have expectations of being a lot higher than that.
Well, I have a dark horse for the playoffs. Now, I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs, but I think this is a team that some people will put mid-table or lower, who I think could surprise people. There's always one that comes up that nobody expects or you don't think are going to do particularly well, and then all of a sudden they do. And I think Stevenage did it a couple of years ago. And I think Doncaster could. I think they've got a good manager in McCann. He did a great job with Hull once before, getting them promoted from this division and then keeping them up in the division. They made some good signings. There was a lot of praise for Matty Pearson on not the top 20, but the way that he got absolutely owned when we drew 2-2 Huddersfield probably doesn't convince me. But Glenn Middleton, Brandon Hanlon, really good signings, I think, for this level. Jamie Sterry, who, if I think back, I think he was at Hartlepool. I might be wrong about that. In fullback, Luke Molyneux, who's everybody's favourite fantasy league player. Owen Bailey, who was on the cusp of greatness for them last season, let's say. Lo Tatalo, who's come in and for the keeper as well. I just really like the look of Doncaster. And I think that they are a team who will be more accustomed to League One than League Two. They won League 2 last season, but there were mainstays in this division for a while, particularly the 2021 season. When we were here, they were challenging for promotion under Darren Moore. So I've got a feeling that Doncaster will do better than many people think. Will they do what Leyton Orient did last season? Probably not. But I think that they could be a team with first season syndrome. Right.
Yeah. I imagine I can definitely foresee a fast start by Doncaster, certainly. And then maybe it'll tail off. But yeah, I'm with you. It's interesting. I think of the promoted clubs, I think Doncaster and Bradford will both be absolutely fine. How fine and how lofty that they find themselves at the table will be dependent on lots of things. But I don't think they'll be in the relegation conversation. Port Vale, I think, will be down in that conversation. We've already mentioned Wimbledon, of course.
Right, let's jimmy this up then. I'm not going to talk. We're not going to pick all of our teams in the playoffs. We are going to pick who we think will be promoted through the playoffs. I'll tell you what, I will pick the other 3 teams that I think will be in the playoffs, but I won't give any particular reason for them. And because we're doing it off the cuff, I will clearly forget some. But I think the playoffs will consist of something like Stockport, Bolton, Blackpool, and Cardiff, roughly.
Interesting. You changed your mind on Cardiff then since we spoke last week, haven't you? Interesting, very interesting. I think you don't back Dave Charner at your peril, but I think the departures of their team this season and just some of the other clubs that they're going to be fighting with for that playoff position. I can see Stockport missing out on the playoffs this season. That might be a bold shout. The 4 I've got in the playoffs are Wycombe, Plymouth, Blackpool and Bolton, with Cardiff in 7th. So, but I put them and Stockport in like a little mini league of all playoff contenders.
So, do we predict who's going to win the playoffs, or is it just that they're the four in the playoffs? It could literally be any of them, or do you have one of them that you think actually, if it gets to a playoff, I quite fancy them?
I
And I'll
think
let
in terms of you go. No, you go.
I'm going for Stockport.
Okay.
I like Stockport, like you say. Never write off Dave Challoner. I don't think that they have lost enough for them to be hugely impacted. I think the likes of Jaden Febvrier, Jack Diamond, to be fair to him, Owen Moxon, who we apparently missed out on, Kyle Wooten, Callum Connolly, Ollie Norwood, Lewis Bate. They've still got a great side. They've got a good squad. They came up last season. That was their first season. They obviously missed out in the playoffs. And I just think that they're going to carry that forward. I actually think that they will. I think the top three will probably separate from the rest. And I think that they'll be like Sunderland in the Championship last year. They might just be out of reach of the top two. But I think that they'll have, come March, I don't think they'll have any worries about dropping out of the top six.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling a little bit silly leaving them out now upon this discussion and putting Plymouth in there, because I think I was quite up on Plymouth until I listened to them at the Top 20 podcast earlier, and then kind of doubting my own prediction a little bit. And like you say, I literally I can, in my head, I can foresee a drop off from Stockport, but can I realistically see Dave Shannon not getting in the playoffs when literally every season he's had as a manager, he's either won the league or got in the playoffs? I think that's a silly thing to predict, isn't it? So yeah, I'll be honest with you, Wickham, providing the manager can make it stick. So there's a question mark there, but I think there's question marks over all the teams in some way, shape, or form. I just think their recruitment is incredible. I think just the quality they have on the pitch and the depth of quality they have on the pitch, albeit with a lot of names that maybe a few people might not be as familiar with. I just think they've made some incredibly good signings, and if it clicks, it could be great. They've still got Richard Kone, who did tail off, of course, second half of the season, but clearly one of the most talented goal scorers in League One. The fact that they turned down, £5 or £6 million for him in January would indicate they're probably going to keep hold of him this summer, unless someone offers really, really, really silly money. But if you're a League One club and you're happy to turn that down, I think you're building something. I put Wickham to finish third. I almost put them to win the league, guys, and then I came to my senses. But so in terms of just quality on the pitch, I'm gonna pick Wickham for a playoff win.
That actually surprises me, because I thought that they were poor in the second half of last season. I think since they lost Matt Bloomfield, they were a side that I really didn't like. If I'm honest, I didn't fancy them for promotion. I thought that they would fall away. They did fall away. I thought they were stodgy. So it's interesting. I'm not. We've seen in the past you can buy all the players that look good on paper and then it just doesn't work out. Rotherham, classic example last season, which takes us to the team I think are going to finish second in Huddersfield. I sincerely hope from the bottom of my heart, with every single ounce of my being, that I am wrong about this prediction, because nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see a club spending massive amounts of money to try and get out of the division fail, especially when they've been spending big amounts of money on players that are either ours or that made part of their name with us. When you've got Joe Taylor and Dion Charles up front, you don't need to spend millions on Alfie May. He's 30 odd years old. There's no resale value. They are the epitome of what's wrong. At least when Birmingham came up, they were buying championship ready players. They got promoted, and the squad that they got promoted with was championship ready. At least they spent money on forward progression. Huddersfield are like Steve Evans last year. It's like the fat kid in the sweet shop with a note rather than coins. And I thought at first that they were actually making quite wise acquisitions. And I was with you. I tipped them not to do well. And then I was with you and I tipped them. I got on board with you. Like, oh, that's actually quite good. They are making sensible ones. And now they're not. Now they're just buying whatever they want when they want. But sadly, I think it's going to work. But my sincere hope is that it goes belly up, that the fickle fans that they have there turn very quickly on the manager, as they did on Worthington, as they did on Duff, and they end up outside the top six. But I don't think they will.
Yeah, agreed. I 100% agree with the sentiment. But apart from the Alfie May signing, which just seems that's just not fair, really, I do think the recruitment is a lot more joined up this year than it was last. And what's really different for me, it was not necessarily Matt Murray being announced as manager. Obviously, that's his first role.
Lee Grant.
Sorry, Matt Murray, Jesus Christ. I've got goalkeepers of the same era. Lee Grant, of course. But it's the backroom stuff that he's brought in alongside him. It just, there's a structure there now that wasn't there last year. Annoyingly, like we said, even if things aren't perfect, if you've got better players than everyone else, you've got to monumentally screw that up to not be successful. And yeah, I hope they do, but I can't. I just think they're going to have more. They're going to have more than on the pitch in terms of quality than the vast majority of the rest of the league, and as they should with the amount of money they spent. But ultimately, they have spent it. They have got that squad. They do have those players. So yeah, that's sadly where we're going to have to stick them. And I agree. I'll put them second.
Now, last year I made the mistake of predicting in the Championship that Luton were going to win it, and they came down. So I'm going to make the same mistake again, and hopefully, I don't think the same happens, to be fair. But I think that they're out-and-out title winners. It's not just that they've got the money. I think they've made some good signings. Kai Naismith, George Saville, Naki Wells are three that really sit well with me. But I just think that they should be far too good for this level. And another two players I think that they've got who I think could tear this division up are Marvellous Nakamba and Shandon Baptiste, who once upon a time was with Oxford United. I think they've just got a good squad. If it doesn't go well, they've got the deep pockets thanks to those parachute payments to be able to recruit in January. I wouldn't begrudge them the promotion. I was delighted when Luton got into the Premier League. Must have been really tough to have been a Hatters fan over the last 2 years. Anyone who knows me knows I do have a soft spot for them, having them as my big club when I was a kid. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for Luton. I won't have as soon as everything kicks off next week until a year in the future. But when they're not in the same division as us, I do always want them to win their games, and I think that they will win a majority of their games this season to take the League One title.
You know what I like about Luton is we all know that they have the potential to outspend everyone in this division, and I like that they haven't just thrown a load of money at it. They've ring-fenced that cash seemingly to go towards their new stadium. Brilliant. Putting it into infrastructure. That's smart. I just don't think there would be that many clubs and ownerships that make that decision in the situation they find themselves in. I have been really impressed with their signings. They've gone for experience. They have got players that are going to be for the here and now, get them out of this league, and then they can rebuild next season. It is my expectation. I'm with you. Put them as favourites to win the league. A lot of the players that are in that squad were playing Premier League football just over a year ago. So they don't turn into really bad players overnight. Okay. Did they overachieve to get to the Prem? Yes. Were they quite at Premier League quality? No, otherwise they'd still be there. But there's a big old jump in quality from League One to the bottom of the Premier League. And some of those players are still around. Hot take. Just one hot take. And this is not, I'm saying I'm predicting this is going to happen. But there's just a little thing in the back of my mind that can think this is something that I kind of could foresee. That Luton, they still haven't quite gelled with Matt Bloomfield just yet. Obviously, he didn't keep them up. They had some improvements in their performances, but nothing too tangible. Wickham have yet to gel with I forget the name of their manager now. Who's their manager? Whoever Wickham's manager is, I forget his name. I can foresee both of those teams. That's really annoyed me. Both of those teams. Dodd, isn't it? It's Dodd.
Dodd. Yeah,
Jason Dodd.
Is he the one that was at Sunderland? Mike Dodds.
It's Mike. Yes, it is. Yes, thank you. I said, who's Jason Dodd? Oh, he was a coach that was always available. Used to be at Southampton on Football Manager. Anyway, I can foresee a small chance of both of those teams, Wickham and Luton, having less than positive starts. So not like relegation places, but just slower starts than they'd like. And a managerial change to happen at both of those clubs, and Matt Bloomfield end up back at Wickham and taking them up.
Fair enough. You sold on Wickham going up, aren't you? Anyway, even if it means sacking Mike Dodds, you definitely think Wickham are going up.
Yeah, I'm just really impressed with their business and the business that they did last season as well. But yeah, we'll see.
Not having that. Right, here's the big one. This is what people tune into. We've got 3 minutes of normal time left. I'm assuming it's going to take a little bit longer than that. Where will Lincoln City finish? And for this one, I'm going to pass it to you first.
I have predicted for Lincoln City to finish in 12th position in League One. You?
For those at home, just so you know, I've also written 12th in League One. But we are on this precipice. We are right on this precipice where it could be one thing or the other, and 12th feels like a sitting on the fence. Because the other thing I've written here is standing still, is it progression? Because that's what I kind of want to mention. We always say if you're standing still in this division, you're going backwards. That was said last year in terms of budget, in terms of if your budget stays still, you're going backwards because everyone else's is going forwards. But in terms of everything else, is standing still progression? In real terms, Lincoln City at this moment in time have probably stood still over the summer. In that, Paudie O'Connor, big central defender, gone. Sonny Bradley, big central defender, come in. Almost like for like, both going to be dominant in the air. Both played for top half League One teams at the end of last season. Sonny Bradley probably a little bit more experienced, but you're almost saying like for like, and it would be hard to sit down and go, he's a better player than him, because Sonny Bradley's had a better career than Paudie O'Connor, but Paudie O'Connor's younger. Paudie O'Connor, top aerial duels last season, whereas Sonny Bradley kind of on the periphery of Derby for a bit. It's hard to split them. You then look at Sean Rowan and Riley Towler. Okay, so Riley Towler, not as much a left back as a left-sided centre-back, but Sean Rowan could play both. But Riley Towler has got championship experience and was probably a little bit more highly rated, but Sean Rowan, undeniable potential. It's almost like for like again. So in actual fact, if we replace Ethan Erhahon, which we will, and we'll bring in a left-back, which we will, we're almost like for like, because we must have the smallest squad churn in the entire Football League. But we're stood still in real terms. Would you agree with that before I carry on?
I'm going to propose a small counter argument.
Okay, can you do that after I finish then?
Yes, okay.
Because I know your small counter argument will take us into Tuesday.
Fair point.
But my argument is standing still actually progression when a majority of the players that we're expecting to do well this year, had they done well last year, we would have finished further up. As in the likes of Rico Hackett, the likes of Jack Moylan, the likes of Ben House, the likes of Jova McCarmy, all had ups and downs over last season. Whereas now we've got that consistency, we've got that togetherness, we've got 46 games as a team under our belt. So little has changed that it's almost like I'll liken it to a VW camper van. If you buy a new VW camper van, people say that actually it gets better after the 100,000 miles. Once everything's bedded in and you've changed and tweaked a few little bits, the engine becomes more reliable once it's actually run for a while. If we are like that, if we are standing still in terms of personnel, we could actually be progressing in terms of cohesion. So therefore, is standing still progression? Potentially. Now I'll let you have your counter argument.
Well, you almost answered it yourself, but I will. Yeah, I'll mention it in this regard because it's kind of the same point. But I just think, do you have to sign new players to be in a better position than you were last year? Do you have, in terms of being a better team? Because progression is about, we're a better football team than we were this time last year. That's the question, isn't it? And there are players in the club, in the team now, particularly young players, who are better footballers now than they were this time last year. So it's the same names on the team sheet, but is the actual ability in the squad progress? Like Jova McCarmy, the obvious one, of course, like where he was this time last year compared to his role in the squad and the likely kind of predicted impact he's going to have this season is significantly higher than it was this time last year. Like you said, there were some players that maybe underperformed a little bit last year. Jack Moylan, I think, is going to play a far greater role this season than he did last, but more reliable, more mature, etc. So I don't think it always has to be just transfers and players in versus players out, which dictate what your level is. Just because they're the same names on the team sheet doesn't necessarily mean they're just as good as they were or just as bad as they were before. That was kind of my argument. However, and also it's like you see the intangibles, particularly at the start of the season, of like team cohesion and the culture, which you can't measure, but there's clearly an element of that definitely gets you something. You've seen that with international football. We just witnessed earlier today that team ethic can buy you something. So, but also I just think that there are so many teams that they are significantly stronger than us. So I don't foresee us being in a genuine playoff race. Now, if the stars align and everything clicks and everyone stays fit, and 2 or 3 of those teams that we have predicted to be strong have poor seasons, have slow starts, maybe. But this time last year, I predicted us to finish 6th. And that was, in hindsight, probably a slightly elevated expectation of the reality of where we are. So I've tried to be a lot more balanced and just realistic this time round. So I can see us with a league finish very similar to last season. Nowhere near relegation. I really can't see us being in that fight at all. I can't see us seriously threatening the top 6. But I can see us being exciting, which is probably something that wasn't the case this time last year because of our system.
I'm going to do something more in-depth written later in the week, but let me put a counter argument. I've gone 12th. We could be south of that if things don't quite work our way. You said if we get the rub of the green, if the stars align, what if they don't? Our current squad is 26 players. That includes, and I've got the list in front of me, so if it looks like I'm reading, I am. Okawoy, probably not first team. Charlie Parks, probably not first team. That's 24. Kamson Kamara, probably not first team and injured. 23. Zach Geacock and Jamie Pardington, 22, 21. Keepers, you can only play 1. Oisin Gallagher takes you down to 20. You then got Ben House potentially injured, 19. Eric Ring injured, 18. Lewis Monsma injured, 17. All of a sudden, that's threadbare going into the season. Now, I appreciate that we are still waiting to bring in the left back and we are still waiting to bring in the central midfielder. So that takes you back up to 19. But when you're going to be playing week in, week out, Saturday, Tuesday, EFL Trophy, League, EFL Trophy, League Cup, EFL Trophy, League. Okay, EFL Trophy, you put a couple of more of those back in play, potentially if they're fit, a Kamson Kamara or an Okawoy or whatever. So I did say that we did go a couple of weeks ago. I said we only need to sign 1 or 2. We only need to replace 1 or 2. But actually, we're not in the grip of an injury crisis. But with Ben House, potentially, we don't know. Broken nose, could miss the first few weeks of the season. Eric Ring, just the first couple of games of the season. Dom Jeffries, probably not back till November. Lewis Monsma, a little bit longer. They're fringe players. It doesn't affect what the starting 11 would be, but that puts a lot of pressure then on some of the older legs in the starter 11. James Collins, fair enough. We can rotate with Draper. You can rotate with Rob Street. Not too worried about that, but it's certain key positions. That's my worry. And all you need to do is in the first 2 weeks of the season, get 2 more injuries. And all of a sudden we are very threadbare. And that is the imminent threat to my prediction of 12.
Yeah, I think, with the discussion, we kind of counter-argumented ourselves twice there. But all the potential pros of the development of the younger players, of the floor being lifted in terms of the base level of the squad, but also the question marks that you just shared there. Realistically, as a prediction, you even that out into basically where we are in the middle of the table, not really making any progress in terms of league table with where we are. And in terms of my prediction, I've got 11th down to 17th as a little mini league, what I just called also rounds. Not ever really. I do. Not ever like a serious relegation threatened team. Not even a team that has a serious aspirations of a playoff push. Just they were there as well. And I think, to be honest, with all the variables you mentioned there, that will put us somewhere between 11th and 17th. Stars align, yet we could push higher than that depending on other teams struggling. I can't, even when the worst happens, I can't see us being lower than that. So, yeah. But 12th is interesting that we both predicted that number without actually speaking to each other prior to this.
And Ben has said so in the in there as well. Let me just check that because Ben actually sent me his 1 to 24 earlier. So let's see if actually he's just doing it to be a football friend or if he's actually doing it because that's exactly where he put us. He did put the Imps 12th when he messaged me earlier. So there we go. Ben is on board as well. It must be the football genius must be rubbing off on him. Have you been rubbing yourself on Ben recently? I haven't on purpose.
I did sit next to him yesterday. There's not a lot of space, is there? When you sat
Ben's looking trim at the minute. What do you mean?
Yes, he's done very well. It was not a lot of space because it's the GBM stand at Tinsel Bank, and then there's not a lot of room between the seats. That's what it is.
Oh dear. Right, as we have run over massively, and I need a cup of tea and a wee, I think that is enough from the Stacey West podcast. We are now back to 2 a week, which means on Wednesday, I believe we've got Ben and Emily for you, and they will be previewing the upcoming Reading encounter, probably giving a little bit of their own thoughts on the upcoming season and any news that may develop between then and now. Who knows? We might sign a central midfielder. I think it's unlikely. We might get the breakthrough in the case of the missing left back, like some sort of amateur detective. But I honestly believe that the team that started yesterday will be very, very similar to the team that starts next week. In 1 week's time, I think it's probably Chris and I will be talking about a proper game again, a game that actually matters. But in the meantime, 4-2 against West Brom, we'll have that. Ethan Erhahon, we won't have that. Lionesses, champion of Europe, we'll have that. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.